Okay. Got my lozenges, my water. My husband and I, it's a joke in our house. He's like, your body thinks it's time for retreat. So it's sick, it's getting sick, but I'll be all better, so. 2 weeks. Alrighty. We are going to be studying Revelation 17 and 18 today, and I cannot believe we're almost done. And I can't wait to teach next week. Okay, so chapters 17 and 18. It's the desolation and the destruction. Abominations and symbols galore. If you did not pick one up, there's charts in the back that I pulled out of Chuck Swindoll's commentary, just trying to give an overview of the symbols that are in chapter 17. I'm not going to go over them all specifically, but as you study this week, it will shed huge light and hopefully understanding as you're studying the Word and you're reading and looking at these symbols and what they represent. But what these two chapters do begin, these two chapters are the beginning, as John describes the Lamb's step-by-step victory over the beast and his kingdom. Chapter 17 is the religious system of the beast is being judged, and in chapter 18 it's more the economic and political system of the beast is being judged. These two chapters, as I said, are full of symbolism. I've listed a few. The true church, as we're going to be reading, is the pure virgin. The false religious system is described as a harlot who has abandoned the truth and prostituted herself for personal gain. So the contrast to the bride, to the pure bride, is the harlot. A Babylon isn't the city of Babylon. A Babylon, as described here, is the political and economic system that has sought to control people's minds and destinies. It's the Antichrist, it's the beast's kingdom. The contrast to Babylon is the city of God, the New Jerusalem, the eternal home that's prepared for the Lamb's wife. So each generation of believers, even through today, must keep ourselves pure from the pollution of both the harlot and Babylon. To clarify further, Babylon is not simply the historical city situated in the ancient Middle East, which is present-day Iran. Chuck Swindoll says it is best to identify Babylon not as a specific city or country, but as the representation of a final, godless, humanistic, and nationalistic worldwide religious system. So in the same way, he gave the example that we might refer to Wall Street to describe the entire American financial system. You talk Wall Street, that's Babylon. It's encompassing this final godless society. Revelation uses Babylon to refer to the end times religious, political, economic empire of the Antichrist. So as you're reading this and you're studying it, it's not just one little city. It's the entire encompassing kingdom that is going to be ruled and under the influence of the Antichrist. I'm going to begin by reading chapter 17. One of the seven angels who had the seven bowls came and said to me, this is John, "Come, I will show you the punishment of the great prostitute who sits on many waters. With her the kings of the earth committed adultery, and the inhabitants of the earth were intoxicated with the wine of her adulteries." Then the angel carried me away in the spirit into a desert. Then I saw a woman sitting on a scarlet beast that was covered with blasphemous names and had 7 heads and 10 horns. The woman was dressed in purple and scarlet and was glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. She held a golden cup in her hand filled with the abominable things and the filth of her adulteries. This title was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. When I saw her, I was greatly astonished. Then the angel said to me, "Why are you astonished? I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come up out of the abyss and go to his destruction. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, now is not, and yet will come." Verse 9, this calls for a mind with wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 hills on which the woman sits. They are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come, but when he does come, he must remain for a little while. The beast who once was and now is not is an 8th king. He belongs to the 7 and is going to his destruction. The 10 horns you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but who for 1 hour will receive authority and as kings along with the beast. They have one purpose and will give their power and authority to the beast. They will make war against the Lamb, but the Lamb will overcome them because he is Lord of lords and King of kings. And with him will be his called, chosen, and faithful followers. Then the angel said to me, "The waters you saw, where the prostitute sits, are people, multitudes, nations, and languages. The beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. They will eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to give the beast their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. The woman you saw is the great city that rules over the kings of the earth." May God add his blessing to the reading of his word. So we begin in verse 1 of chapter 17, and it begins with an invitation. One of these 7 angels, who had poured out a bowl symbolizing the final wrath of God, asks John, he gives him an invitation, he says, "Come and see what God will do with the beast's worldwide religious political system." And it's almost, this chapter becomes an angel-led tour, explaining the meanings of some of the images in this chapter. The angel states there will be great punishment for the harlot, that her religious influence will have spread so far and so wide to the high places, so the kings of the earth will even be under her influence. And the spiritual immorality will have caused the whole world to fall into a spiritual drunken stupor. Verse 3 through 6, John is carried away in the spirit into the wilderness and into the spiritual realm. And there he sees the harlot. He sees the woman. Now, Warren Wiersbe, in his commentary, said in contrast, we think of Genesis 2, which speaks of a pure bride in a lovely garden. Here, by the Bible's end, civilization has degenerated to an impure harlot in the wilderness. So we begin with a pure bride in a lovely garden, and we're ending time with an impure harlot in the wilderness. He goes on to say that is what sin does to the world. Now, this woman's posture is important. She's seated upon many waters, and she rode atop a beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. Again, that's the symbol for the Antichrist. And this chart is excellent. To sit and take some time with this chart, you will understand much of what you're studying so much better. And then to verse 4, John goes on to fully describe this woman. And it is a full description. He sees a woman dressed and adorned in all of these jewels and in the typical fashion of an ancient prostitute. She held this gold cup, and it symbolized her immorality, how it pollutes the nations with its filth and abomination. Power, wealth, pollution, persecution, those are the words that summarize the great harlot's involvement on a worldwide scale. He goes on in verse 5 and talks about a title that was written on her forehead: Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of prostitutes and of the abominations of the earth. Her name, Babylon the Great. He's saying it's a mystery and requires interpretation. But as the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth, you know how I like to look things up, and abominations, just defined out of a dictionary, something that causes disgust and hatred. She's the mother of that. She's the mother of all that creates just disgust and hatred. Also in the dictionary, the antonym to that, the opposite of an abomination, is love. She's going to be responsible for numerous religions that follow after her, that follow her example. And together with the Antichrist, the woman's going to lead the world in untold abominations. Then in verse 6, he says, I saw that the woman was drunk with the blood of the saints, the blood of those who bore testimony to Jesus. So in fact, this woman, Babylon, he's describing her, she's portrayed as being drunk with the blood of the saints, those who have been martyred for Jesus Christ. So this false religious system that she represents is going to lead to a zealous persecution and execution of true servants of God. So in response to this vision, John says, when I saw her, he wondered greatly. In some translations, he was astonished, greatly astonished. Can you imagine the look on his face? He couldn't understand. He couldn't even comprehend. And in verse 7, the angel, knowing that and reading John's face, asked him why. Why are you so astonished? Why do you wonder? I will explain to you the mystery. I will explain to you the mystery of the woman and of the beast she rides, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns. So he goes on. The beast which you saw once was, now is not, and will come out of the abyss and go to his destruction. So this is the beast. This is the Antichrist, who was. And remember when we studied and he died, and then he's going to have this false resurrection? He's yet to come. He's saying he's going to come back up out of the abyss and everyone's going to be astonished. The inhabitants of the earth, whose names have not been written in the book of life from the creation of the world, will be astonished when they see the beast, because he once was, now is not, and he will be yet to come. So he's saying this calls for wisdom. Because it's a mystery. There's a mystery surrounding the name of the harlot. There's just a mystery about all of this. In the New Testament, mystery is a hidden truth requiring spiritual, intelligence, and discernment to grasp. And again, the chart is a huge asset here in trying to understand. But what we're going to do is instead of trying to pick this apart symbol by symbol, we're going to look at it more as the big picture. And in chapter 13, if you remember, the beast and the false prophet, they were always seen working together. Always working together. And in chapter 17, John is describing these two respective realms, the global empire and the worldwide religion. They're intensely linked. So during the 3.5 years of the Antichrist reign, the world is going to suffer under this merger, under this godless, false religion, political, economic system. And when one stumbles and falls or is affected, it affects the whole system. So there's this merger between a totalitarian state and an anti-Christian church. The beast empire is going to be supported by an allegiance of nations from around the world. They're all going to be duped. They're all going to be under his influence. Verse 15 says, peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Not only will they be under the influence, but all the world powers will surrender their sovereignty to the Antichrist. They'll give it their power. They're going to give it to him. And in verse 18, he will reign over the kings of the earth from his great capital city, from his throne, from his kingdom. He will reign. If we look back into the Old Testament, this is the original Tower of Babel dream of a worldwide government with one ruler, one language, one religion, one economy. Finally realized, but for a brief time. But for a brief time. Figuratively, John is saying for 1 hour. Then in verses 16 and 17, the beast and the 10 horns you saw will hate the prostitute. They will bring her to ruin and leave her naked. So here, this great merger, this use of each other, it's all going to fall apart. Because all of a sudden the beast and the 10 horns you saw, they're going to hate the prostitute. They're going to hate the harlot. They will bring her to ruin, leave her naked. They will eat her flesh, burn her with fire. For God has put it into their hearts to accomplish his purpose by agreeing to give the beast their power to rule until God's words are fulfilled. So the angel's prophetic explanation ends with this profound irony. This world system bent on bringing glory to humanity is going to end in tragedy, a double tragedy. First, the kings of the earth are going to turn on each other, and then that fragile allegiance is going to crumble. That's going to climax at the Battle of Armageddon. And second, the battle actually ends when the glorious deliverer descends with his own army of resurrected and glorified saints from heaven, and he will exercise vengeance against the false Christ and his armies. So you read this and it's just dark and it's disturbing. And you think, how does this apply to me today? What does this mean for me today? Because Revelation 17 is telling us that in the last days, the devil is going to concoct such a spiritual drug, so potent, any drug of today won't even measure up. So you think about how, my son has me watch that show Intervention sometimes, and it's so disturbing sometimes. But you look at these people who become addicted to drugs, certain drugs, and what it does to their body and the stupor they're in and the way it affects their thinking and their rationalizing. The condition of society is going to be worse than that. They're going to be in such a stupor under control of the Antichrist. It's going to be worse than any controlled substance that people put in their body today. It's going to look like candy. People are going to take it, and they're going to be in a stupor. And we think about that, okay, that's going to happen. But there is devilish deception alive today. John warned in 1 John 2:18, Just as you heard that the Antichrist is coming, even now many Antichrists have appeared. And in 1 John 4:3, the spirit of the Antichrist is already in the world. So presently, we have this wave of false religion that exchanges God's grace and mercy for self-sufficiency. Human effort. It trades God's commands for personal definitions of right and wrong. It brushes aside God's promises with this sophisticated unbelief. Chuck Swindoll said there's two important truths to pull from here and to remember. First, religious activity feels full and alive, but is in truth empty and dead in and of itself. And let me explain. At salvation, we become new creatures. But as we grow, so many times we revert back to our self-sufficiency, our proud ways. And we seek to somehow earn God's favor on our own. And we forget that the unmerited grace that saved us is the same grace that keeps us. That's what we need to. The same unmerited grace that saved me is what's going to keep me. I can't do anything in and of myself and in my own strength. See, but Satan comes and twists situations and puts little thoughts and speaks lies. And soon we're thinking, well, I can do that. God couldn't mean that in his word. Second, Satan's strategy appears to be impressive and effective, but in truth, it's impotent and deceptive. Satan, he is the father of lies. And his host of demons have encouraged us to pursue purposes and meaning and eternal life by means of human effort. We are deceived through lies of self-reliance, seeking to earn God's favor by our own effort. Then there's the lies of self-condemnation. How can God love you after what you've done? Neither is true. They're lies. Both stem from the lie that good works are the basis of our relationship with God. God's offer of salvation is solely by grace. Solely by grace through faith. And when we cling to that, when we set our eyes on Jesus, when we stand firm on that, we take the legs out from underneath him and his strategy. So may we set our eyes upon Jesus. May we keep the gift of salvation ever in the forefront of our minds and stand on what we know is true. So we're going to move into chapter 18, which is the destruction of Babylon. I'm going to read to you because I was marking up these 2 pages like crazy and I thought I just need to read them. This again is from Chuck Swindoll's commentary beginning for chapter 18. And this is before he gets into the verses in the scripture themselves. This is just his own commentary, his own personal reflection. What if the entire world as you know it, people, things, events, and activities were suddenly to collapse? What if your sources of comfort, luxury, and entertainment were lost forever? Sounds like a bad sci-fi movie, doesn't it? That kind of thought frightens people. Nobody wants the stock market to crash, or the power grid to fail, or their employer to go bankrupt, or a hurricane to level the city. Too much of our lives depend on the world continuing on just as it is. Sadly, the same thing is true for many Christians. They are so rooted in the world that it would take a God-sized rototiller to pull them loose. All my life I've heard people say, only half joking, that they hope there's X in heaven, with X being whatever source of passing earthly pleasure they happen to prefer. Sorry. It could be golf, chocolate, movies, television. I've heard a few even say they hope the Lord will delay his return until they're able to do with why being some earthly activity or event they haven't enjoyed yet, maybe getting married or retiring or traveling to Europe. Comfort, convenience, luxury, recreation. If we're really honest with ourselves, we'll probably discover that we're more attached to the things of this world than we care to admit. It's a sobering realization when we arrive at Revelation 18 and learn that all those things of the world that receive so much of our time and attention, all those X's and Y's of our lives, are destined for the fires of judgment. At the end of Revelation 17, we learn that Babylon is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth, the end times capital of a godless worldwide empire under the Antichrist. That future Mecca of Netheism and Vegas of vanity will be the mother of evil and all forms of false religion. Like Paris, she presents a lifestyle of high culture. Like Jerusalem, she's a crossroads of world religion. Like Washington, she's teeming with political power. Well, in fact, if you were to take all the powerful cities of the world and merge them into one grand megalopolis, you would have Babylon. The identification of the actual city in the coming tribulation is less important than the fact that it will be the nerve center of the Antichrist's final world system, which is directly opposed to God and his people. But it won't last. In fact, the moment that Satan is cast down from heaven, he will know that he has only a short time. Revelation 12, verse 12. Before the Antichrist has time to break all of his campaign promises, his pseudo-utopia will begin to crumble. Already, in chapter 14, verse 8, we are forewarned about its inevitable demise, like a weatherman tracking a storm of the century as it heads straight for a helpless coastal city. Fallen is Babylon the Great, who has made all the nations drink of the wine of the passion of her immorality. Revelation 18 begins with that same pronouncement. So Revelation 18 begins with, in verse 2, fallen is Babylon the Great. So here's John at the end of chapter 17, and after that one angel took him on his little angel-led tour through those images, he saw another angel coming from heaven. Now this angel had great authority, and the earth was illuminated by his splendor. With a mighty voice he shouted, Fallen is Babylon the Great. She has become a house for demons and a haunt for every evil spirit, a haunt for every unclean and detestable bird. For all the nations have drunk the maddening wine of her adulteries. The kings of the earth committed adultery with her, and the merchants of the earth grew rich from her excessive luxuries. Now these verses add more detail. Babylon's going to be a haunt of demons whose mission it will be to inspire extreme human wickedness, from sexual immorality to unbridled luxury. And the world is going to jump in. They're going to celebrate that. They're going to celebrate these sins in ways we could not even imagine. But in Revelation 18, God, through John, is making it very clear that within a few short years, God will come and put an end to that party of sin. This announcement was anticipated in Revelation 14, verse 8. As I said before, the angel said, Fallen is Babylon the Great, which made all the nations drink the maddening wine of her adulteries. Now there's definite reference here to Jeremiah chapters 51 and 52, where the prophet saw the historical fall of Babylon. But here, John is seeing the destruction of the spiritual Babylon, the world system that was organized by the beast. This angel had great power, had great glory, and it radiated throughout the earth. Now the phrase fallen, he doesn't say fallen once, he says fallen twice. Fallen. It suggests a dual judgment. Babylon, the harlot from chapter 17, will be judged, And the political Babylon here in chapter 18 is going to be judged. This thought is amplified when verse 6, when God announces Babylon's going to get double for her many sins. Verses 4 through 8, then I heard another voice from heaven. Now this is a totally different voice. So he was invited and led by one angel in chapter 17. Then another angel descended in great glory and power, made that announcement about Babylon falling. Now he hears another voice from heaven. Come out of her, my people, so that you will not share in her sins, so that you will not receive any of her plagues. For her sins are piled up to heaven, and God has remembered her crimes. Give back to her as she has given. Pay her back double for what she has done. Mix her a double portion from her own cup. Give her as much torture and grief as the glory and luxury she gave herself. In her heart she boasts, I sit as a queen. I am not a widow, and I will never mourn. Therefore, in one day her plagues will overtake her, death, mourning, and famine. She will be consumed by fire, for mighty is the Lord God who judges her. Now in Jeremiah 51, verses 6 through 9, God called for Israel to flee from Babylon before the Lord's time of vengeance. So just as historical Babylon was judged for its wickedness, this end times Babylon will fall and take everyone down with it. That's why God is making this call to his people from its midst before he pours out his final bowls of wrath. Now, this can cause confusion because remember how we say this book is not necessarily chronological. Okay? Well, chronologically, from the commentaries that I studied, and it is the majority saying chronologically, this call for the exodus of God's people from Babylon is going to come before the 7 bowls of wrath. So before he pours out those bowls of wrath, he's already going to have, he's called his people out. So what Chuck Swindoll, what Warren Wiersbe, what Ray Stedman conferred and were referring, they're saying this referring to the gathering of the 144,000 on Mount Zion back in Revelation 14. Remember when the 144,000 stood on the mountain and were singing praises and they gathered together? He's saying that was most likely the calling out of his people. Those are the people he's referring to here. But then we also remember last week when we were studying, and when the first bowl was poured out, all those lesions came upon all those that had the mark. But it said it only went upon the people. Those without the mark were spared. So God's people were called out, yes, these marked ones before. But I still believe that there are going to be some Christians that are left that are spared in some way from some of this wrath. They're not going to be the original marked Christians. These are going to be ones that turned in that last hour, in those last minutes, and believed. So chronologically, when this part where he says, come out of her, my people, we have to just remember, it's not chronological, that this is most likely happening. It is happening. It's going to happen before the bowls of wrath, and most likely referencing the 144,000 on Mount Zion. Now in verse 6, with the call to come out of Babylon, the voice also described the double portion that was going to be poured out against Babylon because of her intense wickedness. And he goes on to say, she's glorified herself. She's exalted herself. She had this ultimate show of pride. And here we see the fulfillment of Proverbs 16:18. Pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before the fall. We then go on through verses 9 through 19. And all we're going to hear now, John is hearing all this lamenting, this weeping, this crying out. When the kings of the earth who had committed adultery with her, shared her luxury, see the smoke of her burning, they will weep and mourn over her. Terrified at her torment, they will stand far off and cry, "Woe, woe, O great city, O Babylon, city of power! In 1 hour your doom has come." So those are the kings of the earth. Verse 11, the merchants of the earth will weep and mourn over her because no one buys their cargoes anymore. Cargoes of gold, silver, precious stone, and pearls, fine linen, purple, silk, and scarlet cloth, every sort of citron wood, and articles of every kind of ivory, costly wood, bronze, iron, and marble. Cargoes of cinnamon and spice, of incense, myrrh, and frankincense, of wine and olive oil, of fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horse and carriages, bodies and souls of men. They will say, "The fruit you longed for is gone from you. All your riches and splendor have vanished, never to be recovered." The merchants who sold these things and gained their wealth from her will stand far off. Terrified at her torment, they will weep and mourn and cry out, "Woe, woe, O great city, dressed in fine linen, purple and scarlet, and glittering with gold, precious stones, and pearls. In 1 hour such great wealth has been brought to ruin." Then we go on, every sea captain and all who travel by ship, the sailors and all who earn their living from the sea will stand far off. When they see the smoke of her burning, they will exclaim, "Was there ever a city like this great city?" They will throw dust on their heads and with weeping and mourning cry out, "Woe, woe, O great city, where all who had ships on the sea became rich through her wealth. In 1 hour she has been brought to ruin." So John is hearing this series of lamentations, of lamenting from earth, from those who had placed their faith and their hope and their love in the last great Babylonian empire. And 3 different times I just read, they called out, "Woe, woe, O great city." These verses describe mourning of the kings, of the merchants, of those who work for the merchants, of those who have ships on the sea. They're watching Babylon go up in smoke and all their wealth destroyed. So this was a prosperous, ancient area. What they're watching go up in smoke was brought them lots of wealth. It provided for many nations. It employed many people. Business and the government. This is, again, we see, because the kings of the earth, it wasn't just the working class. It wasn't just the merchants and the people that work for them and the people out on the sea. The kings as well. They're all affected. The business, the government, the religious side, again, all intertwined. One affects the other, affects the other. Now this word translated wail, it means a loud lamentation as opposed to silent weeping. They were not quiet in this. And I want you to note, these merchants, nobody was feeling sorry for the city itself or for those who led them. They were feeling sorry for themselves. My wealth is gone. My livelihood is gone. And I also want you to know, as you read, I read that, where did I say they were? Did they come alongside of anybody and try to help them? Or where was their compassion or love for anybody? No, they stood far off. They were terrified. Yes, they had wealth, and yes, they had stuff, and they felt that they were successful. But that's all they had, that stuff. They were scared. And they felt bad it was gone, but they weren't going close to it. They stood far off. What an opposite picture of what we as the church are supposed to be. You see one of your sister's lives in shambles, or things going up in smoke, or things not going well, do we stand far off? Hey, hope it all goes well for you. No, you come and you embrace them and you lay hands on them and you pray and you come into their life and you do what you can to help. We don't stand far off. It's just like in Hebrews when we studied that and we talked about approaching the throne of grace boldly and confidently. And do you remember back when we were studying and we were talking about Joshua and how they would stand 1,000 feet away when they would carry the Ark of the Covenant and they were approaching certain holy things? Couldn't come within 1,000 feet of it. They stood away. We have an invitation. We come into His presence. We come. And as we go into other people's life, we come with His presence and His power. It's not me loving that woman or me doing those things. It's God in me, enabling me to do those things and to understand that there's a need. But this stood out to me. This is going to be a cold, horrible, lonely existence for these people. They might think they're happy. But they stand far off. Really, no loyalty, no care, no compassion. That opposite of love. It's abominations. It's disgusting stuff just happening everywhere in this time. God has brought an end to their luxury, to their wealth, to their customers, and they're all weeping and they're crying out. If you look at the list of commodities, it was long as I read that supported this lifestyle, this wealth, this greed, this selfishness. There was gold, silver, precious stone, costly garments, thyine wood used by the Romans for decorative cabinets, luxury furnishings, imported spices for foods and perfumes. But when you read this and you come to the very end of that list, in verse 13, it says horses and carriages, and then it says, and bodies and souls of men. That's the most disturbing of all. Last on the list is slaves and souls of men. As I read it, it is estimated that 1/3 of Rome's population was enslaved. So we think about the ancient times, we think about slavery and what the readers, when John was writing this, and at that time, it wasn't unusual in that time, in Roman times, for approximately 10,000 human beings to be auctioned off in one day at the great slave market of the empire. People were bought and sold and used, misused. Now, Warren Wiersbe said, is John suggesting that there will be a return to slavery in end times? He said, perhaps not in the ancient sense, but certainly we can see an increasing loss of freedom in our world today. We're slaves to a lot of things in this world. Persons are bought and sold. Think about sports teams even. Get a good, vivid picture of it. They're traded, they're bought, then they're sold, then they're put out on the market for whichever team wants to take them in. Great corporations are more and more seeking to control the lives of those who work for them. As people become more and more enslaved to luxury, with more bills to pay, they find themselves unable to break loose from the system. The beast is going to promise freedom to men and to women, but he's going to put them in bondage. He will take advantage of the people's appetites, and he will use their appetites to enslave them. But then we come to verse 20. And it's quite the contrast, all the lament and the weeping and the mourning. Verse 20 says, rejoice over her, O heaven. Rejoice, saints and apostles and prophets. God has judged her for the way she treated you. Then a mighty angel picked up a boulder the size of a large millstone and threw it into the sea and said, with such violence the great city of Babylon will be thrown down, never to be found again. And listen to this. The music of harpists and musicians, flute players and trumpeters will never be heard in you again. No workman of any trade will ever be found in you again. The sound of a millstone will never be heard in you again. The light of a lamp will never shine in you again. The voice of bridegroom and bride will never be heard in you again. Your merchants were the world's great men. By your magic spell, all the nations were led astray. In her was found the blood of prophets and of the saints and of all who had been killed on the earth. So in contrast to all this lament of the kings and the merchants, here's this one verse of rejoicing. The rejoicing of heavens and inhabitants that Babylon has fallen. And we want to remember how important it is for us to look at these events and interpret these events from God's point of view. Because we're commanded to rejoice. We are to rejoice at the overthrow of Babylon, because in this judgment, God vindicates his servants who were martyred. All his servants who had been martyred. In verse 21, John says, a mighty angel appears and has a giant millstone in his hands. A millstone is this huge circular stone, and it's used to grind grain. It can range anywhere from 100 pounds to 1,000 pounds. He has this giant millstone, and he casts it into the sea. A stone of that size will make great ripples. It's a picture of the finality of God's judgment. A stone that size sinking to oblivion. And in the same way, the destruction of the world system under the Antichrist is going to shake heaven and earth as it vanishes, never to be rediscovered. So, I don't want any of us to interpret or think that this voice of rejoicing is calling us to be glad because sinners are judged. The fact of divine judgment, it should break our hearts, knowing that lost sinners are condemned to eternal punishment. The joy in this section, it's about God's righteous judgment. The fact that justice has been done. We must never cultivate personal revenge. We must always rejoice at the righteous judgments of God. And I want you to notice that repeated refrain that as I read those final verses, will never, no more. These things will never happen here again. These things will never happen in that area, in that kingdom. The angel who had thrown the millstone lists the things of the world that will never rise again. Both the luxuries and necessities will be removed. So, every music, manufacturing, work, weddings, it's all going to come to a violent end. And you might think, well, none of those things in and of themselves are wicked. Some of those things are good. But in the Babylonian world system, those everyday things became tools for glorifying themselves, for glorifying humanity, for glorifying evil. So their disappearance represents the total destruction of every facet of society. All gone. Everything gone at once. Gone. And then, almost as if to remind us, if anyone should think that God is unjust or this is too extreme with his complete destruction of the world system, in verses 23 In 24, the angel reminds us why Babylon had to go, because all the nations were deceived by her sorcery, and in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all who had been slain on earth. So at this point in our study, the political and the economic system of the beast has been destroyed. All that remains is for Jesus Christ to come from heaven and personally meet and defeat the beast and his armies. And this he will do. And then he will establish his righteous kingdom on earth. He will establish his own righteous kingdom on earth, something completely new. He can't leave anything of what was here. It was an abomination. So as we close, we have to ask ourselves a question. Am I a citizen of Babylon or a citizen of heaven? Can you truly rejoice because you know your name is written in heaven? And I know, and Sharon used to say this all the time, I don't care if there's a group of 5 or a group of 10 or a group of 50 or a group of 100 or 500. There are those of us that sit here and might say, I don't know. I think I have. Oh, I did then, but I've been living this way. And then what does Satan do while you're sitting there? He whispers in your ear, don't let everyone around you is already saved and already knows, and you look like an idiot. You've been coming for a year and everyone thinks that you're saved too. I don't know. But that's the stuff Satan does to keep us from truly turning and truly accepting Jesus and this free gift of salvation. So if you're sitting there and there is any question in your mind where your name is written or not written, or if you feel as though you have yoked yourself to Babylon, then today is the day to put your trust in Jesus. And you get out of Babylon and you're welcomed into the family of God. And you're then covered with the righteousness that Jesus died to give you. And I know I've shared this before, and I feel like I just need to say it again. Sometimes I think because I come and I teach this Bible study, everyone looks at me and thinks, well, she must have been a Christian when she was born and accepted Jesus when she was 4 years old, lived this great life and always was following Jesus and never did anything wrong. I did not accept Jesus till I was 28. Sitting in a balcony at a revival Baptist church, Hickory Grove Baptist Church in Charlotte, North Carolina. It doesn't matter how old you are. It just doesn't matter. But sometimes we get in these groups and we think, well, you know what? I can't really say. I don't really understand what they're talking about, but I'm just going to nod and smile and they'll just think I'm one of them. The greatest, we will give Satan the victory and he'll all be smiling and happy. He and his little group. If anyone walks out of here not knowing that you're going to heaven, that you have eternal life, that you are his. So I'm just asking you all, just close your eyes and bow your heads, and if for any reason you doubt that, if for any reason you know for sure, I've never done that. I'm not living that way. I am not living surrendered to Jesus. He is not the Lord of my life. Then you can do that now, directly to him. And then I know Donna and some of the prayer team will remain in the sanctuary. No chit-chatting today. We're just going to file out. But if anyone needs prayer, even just for any reason, just please stay. So God, we all confess that we are sinners. We confess, Lord, that we need you. Lord, I ask you now to just come into my life, to be Lord of my life. Forgive me of my sins. Make me new. Fill me with your Spirit. Lord, I know that you died on the cross for me. You died in my place. You took the punishment that belonged to me. So Lord, today I surrender my life to you. God, I thank you for the gift of your Son. I thank you for that ultimate sacrifice. I thank you for this word. God, I thank you that you are perfectly just. And you are this perfect balance of love and justice and grace and compassion and mercy. God, I pray that we exude you, that your Spirit just flows from us, that it's an expression even just found on our faces. The more I study, the more that I feel like I know you, God, the more that I love you and am in complete awe of you. We serve an awesome God. So may we leave here not hung up on every symbol and understanding every image, but may we leave here with the hope and knowing that we know that God will make right in this world. That He is coming back. That all injustice and evil and wickedness, He will handle it. And we will reign with Him. So Lord, we love you. And it is beyond my mind that you can love us. You see the depths of our heart. You look within our souls and you love us still. There is no love like the love of Jesus. So may we leave knowing we are loved. May we leave here knowing we are filled with His Spirit. And God, if anyone remains, if anybody has asked you into their heart today, God, we praise you for that. And we ask for your blessing and your presence and your hand upon us as we leave this place. And it's in your mighty, just, perfect name that we pray. Jesus.